The first time I understood that my boy was afraid of me, I was standing in the doorway of the corn crib with a broken harness strap in my hand. It was late October, and the air had that dry, dusty smell that comes after the last ears are gathered and the stalks stand empty in the field. The sun was low enough that it came through the cracks in the boards in thin lines, and I could see the dust moving in them like little bits of ash. My son Daniel was 12 then. He had dropped one of the leather traces in the mud, and the mare had stepped sideways, and the whole thing had taken longer than it should have. I remember his hands most of all, not his face, his hands. They were shaking while he tried to wipe the mud off that strap with the side of his sleeve. He would not look up at me, and I remember thinking, Lord, help me. I have taught this boy the wrong fear. My name is Malin. I am an old Amish grandfather now, and I have lived most of my life on the same stretch of ground, under the same ordnung, with the same prayers said over breakfast and supper. I was raised to fear God, and I raised my children to fear God too. That is what I believed I was doing. But there is a difference between teaching a child reverence and teaching a child to flinch. I did not know that difference soon enough. If you have raised sons, or if you were once a son under a hard father, I would be glad to hear what you learned in time, because some things a man only understands after he has already done them. When I was young, fear was not a word we turned over carefully. Fear of the Lord was spoken of as a good thing. And it is a good thing, if a man understands it rightly. It means knowing that God is holy. It means knowing you are not the center of the world. It means bowing your head because something greater than you has made the morning and numbered your days. But in my childhood and in many homes around us, that holy fear got mixed together with the fear of a father's temper, the fear of a bishop's correction, the fear of being seen, the fear of being wrong. My father was not a cruel man. I want to say that plainly. He worked from before daylight until the sky went dark. He could mend a gate with wire and patience. He could tell the weather by how the wind touched the maple leaves. He kept bread on the table and shoes on our feet, and I never heard him speak lightly of God. But he was a hard man. His voice could make a room go still. If a pail was spilled, if a horse was handled poorly, if a chore was forgotten, his jaw would tighten before he spoke. That tightening was warning enough. I learned early to watch him before I answered him. A boy who learns that will often grow into a father who thinks obedience and love are the same sound. When my wife Sarah and I had our first son, I held him in the crook of my arm and promised, without saying it out loud, that he would be raised right. His name was Eli. 2 years later came Daniel, and then our youngest, Samuel. 3 boys in one house make a noise like a small storm. Boots by the door, wooden toys under the bench, little shirts hanging by the stove to dry, whispering after lights out when they thought their mother and I could not hear them. I loved those boys. I loved them with the full strength of a young father who did not yet know how to show tenderness without hiding it inside correction. Daniel was different. Daniel felt things before he understood them. If a calf bawled in the barn, he would worry over it. If his mother looked tired, he would hover near the kitchen as if his nearness might help her. If one of his brothers was corrected, Daniel's face would go pale. even if the correction was not for him. I did not see that as tenderness. I saw it as weakness, and because I saw it wrong, I handled him wrong. He made mistakes in small ways. He hurried when he should have slowed down. He forgot where he set tools. He was afraid of horses at first, which was hard for me to understand, because horses had been part of my life since before I could read. I thought he needed to be pushed through fear, so I raised my voice. I set my mouth hard. I told him a man does not tremble at work God has put in front of him. Those words sounded righteous to me then. Now they sound like a father who did not know his son. I said his name sharply. That was all. Just his name. But the way he folded into himself made Sarah look up from the edge of the field. I remember that too. She did not speak then. She was not a woman to correct her husband in front of the children. But later after supper, when the dishes were washed and the boys were upstairs, she stood by the stove with her hands on the towel and said, "Malin, that boy is not learning God from your voice. He is learning to hide." I did not answer her kindly. That is the shame of it. The truth came to me through the mouth of my wife, and I pushed it away because it touched the part of me I did not want seen. I said she was too gentle. I said boys had to be made strong. I said the world was not kind and the church required obedience. I had many words ready. A proud man usually does. But after she went to bed, I sat alone near the stove. The coals had settled low, and the house made those small winter sounds even though it was summer, boards creaking as the night cooled. I could hear Daniel cough once upstairs, then quiet. I told myself Sarah was wrong. Then I remembered his shoulders when I said his name in the field. A father can win an argument and still lose the truth. The years move the way they do on a farm, fast when you look back, slow when you are inside them. The boys grew taller. Eli took baptism with a calm face and married a good woman from a neighboring district. Samuel wrestled more openly with the rules, but he stayed in his own winding way. Daniel grew quieter. He did his chores. He came to church. He answered when spoken to. He learned the trades he needed. But there was a door inside him that shut when I came near. I would walk into the barn and his back would straighten too quickly. I would ask a question and he would search my face before answering. If I praised him, he looked uncertain, as if praise might be a trick. If I corrected him, he went still. I mistook stillness for respect. Many fathers do. When Daniel was 16, we had the hardest season between us. He had been helping a neighbor repair a shed roof, and he came home late. Not badly late, just late enough that supper had cooled. I was tired. The horses had been difficult that day. A wagon wheel needed attention. Money was short, though we did not say such things in front of the children. Daniel came in with sawdust on his hat and a little blood on one knuckle where he had scraped it. Sarah asked if he was hurt. He said no. I asked why he had not come when he was expected. He began to explain that the neighbor needed one more set of hands before the rain. I heard the first few words and decided he was making excuses. I told him charity does not excuse disorder. I told him a son who cannot honor time at home will not honor vows in the church. I put more weight on that small lateness than it could bear. Daniel looked at me for 1 second, just one, and in that second I saw something that frightened me. Not rebellion, not anger, something colder. He had stopped trying to reach me. He said very softly, Yes, Dad, that was all. For many years I thought the dangerous moment is when a son talks back. I know better now. Sometimes the dangerous moment is when he stops talking altogether. Daniel did not leave in the way some young men leave, with a packed bag and a letter found after dawn. He stayed. He was baptized. He married later than his brothers. He built a life not far from ours. To someone outside the family, it may have looked as if all had gone well. 3 sons raised, 3 sons in the church, grandchildren around the table at Christmas, enough hands at harvest, hymns sung in the same slow way they had always been sung. But a family can look whole from the road and still have a crack running through the middle beam. The crack between Daniel and me showed itself in quiet ways. He brought his children to visit, but he rarely left them alone with me when they were small. Not because he accused me. Daniel was never a man to make accusations. But if one of them spilled milk, he would move before I did. If I shifted in my chair and drew breath to correct, his hand would go to the child's shoulder, gentle but quick. He was protecting them from a storm that had not yet started. That is a hard thing for an old father to see. Shame is not the same as repentance, but sometimes it is the door to it. Shame looks at the ground and says, I do not like what this shows about me. Repentance lifts its eyes and says, Lord, make me different, even if it costs my pride. Years later, Daniel and I were mending fence along the back pasture. He was grown by then, with gray beginning at his temples, and I was already slowing down. The ground smelled of wet cedar and earth. We worked a long time without saying much, and then I said, plain as I could, I was too hard on you. He kept his eyes on the wire. After a while he said, I know you thought you were saving me. I cannot tell you the exact day I changed, because it was not one day. Age helped. Grandchildren helped. Sarah helped more than anyone. The Lord was patient where I had not been. Little by little I began to hear my own voice as others heard it. That is a painful mercy. I began to stop before speaking. I began to ask myself whether a correction was needed or whether I only wanted to feel in command. Those are not the same. The words came out plain. No sermon around them, no explanation to soften them, just the truth. I wanted him to say it was all right. I wanted him to say he understood. I wanted him to make my confession easier to carry. But children are not put on this earth to make their parents' repentance comfortable. After a while he said, I know you thought you were saving me. That line has stayed with me. He did not absolve me. He did not condemn me. He simply named the sorrow of it. I had thought I was saving him from sin, from pride, from the world, from disobedience. And in some ways, perhaps, I had guarded the fence. But I had also made him afraid of the gate. A child should know a father can be displeased without becoming dangerous. A child should know correction can come without humiliation. A child should know the fear of God is not the same as the fear of what mood his father will be in when he comes through the door. I did not always give my sons that gift. I give it now to my grandchildren as best I can. When a small one drops a cup, I try to reach for a cloth before I reach for words. When a boy forgets a tool in the grass, I walk with him to find it, instead of making the whole yard hear his mistake. When a granddaughter asks a question that seems foolish, I remember how many foolish questions I carried silently because I feared the answer would come with scorn. Do I still believe children need discipline? Yes, more than many people now want to admit. A house without discipline becomes a place where everyone serves the strongest appetite in the room. But discipline without tenderness becomes something else. It becomes fear wearing a father's hat. The fear of God, rightly taught, does not make a child shrink from truth. It teaches him he can stand in truth, because God is merciful as well as holy. That took me a long life to learn. I wish I had learned it when my sons were small enough to climb into my lap without wondering whether my hands were gentle. There are memories a man would change if the Lord allowed him to walk backward through time. I have a few. The corn crib doorway, the hayfield, the cold supper, Daniel's hands shaking over a muddy strap. I cannot go back and put a softer voice into those rooms. I cannot unmake the flinch I taught him, but I can tell the truth about it now. And maybe truth, spoken late, still has work to do. If you are a father, especially a father trying hard to raise your children right, listen to an old man for one moment. Do not confuse fear with faithfulness. Do not measure your authority by how quickly the room goes quiet. Ask yourself whether your children come to you when they are troubled, or only when they have no choice. That answer will tell you more than their obedience does. And if you were the son who feared his father more than he trusted him, I will not pretend a few words can mend what years made deep, but I will say this. Sometimes fathers learn too late, and sometimes too late is still the only time they have left to tell the truth. I raised my sons to fear God. One of them feared me instead. That is not a line I say with pride. It is a stone I carry, but carrying it has made me walk more carefully. If this story brought something to mind from your own family, you may leave it in the comments if you wish. I read more than I answer, but I do read. And if you want to hear more stories from an old Amish grandfather, from the long road of marriage, sons, daughters, land, faith, and the mistakes a man only sees clearly near the end, you are welcome to subscribe. May your home be firm enough to guide the young, and gentle enough that they know where to return.